Hello, welcome to the Taylor Unisex bag designed by Huff and Cuffs sew along. I've already made one. This is one I've made. Loved making a really nice design, and so I'm making another one for the sew along. What I have done is I've in the bag there's a credit card pocket, and I filmed it independently, so I'm going to add this to the beginning of the video, plus how to make the strap. So both of these will be different to the fabrics I'm using in the sew along, but I'm just going to slot them at the beginning so that you can prepare them ahead of time, ready for the tutorial. So without further ado, I shall get on with the sew along. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you love making the bag like I did. I'm making another one, so it's got to be good. Happy stitching. Hello, this is my credit card tutorial. When you're making a bag that's small, say a clutch bag or a small crossbody bag that you don't want to put lots of pockets on inside, you can make this credit card holder, which is quite handy to have, just for a few of your cards. So what we're starting with is a piece of fabric that's 15 inches long and 5 inches wide. So if you're using directional fabric, this is the way you want it. And then we have a second piece of fabric that's 5 inches squared, so 5 inches down if you're using directional fabric, 5 inches across. And what we need to do is start by drawing some lines. Now the first line we draw from the top on the right side of the fabric, we draw at 4 1/4 inches down from the top edge. And then the next line we draw 4 inches from the first line, so you're 8 1/4 inches from the top edge. And then the third line, again we want 4 inches from the line you've just drawn, making it 12 1/4 inches from the top edge. And then we want to flip the piece of fabric over that way. Don't flip it long ways, flip it that way. And we want to draw a line on the wrong side at the top, starting at 2 1/2 inches down from the top edge. So that's 2 1/2 inches. Then we go back to doing 4 inches, so it's 6 1/2 inches from the top edge. And then another line at 4 inches, so it's 10 1/2 inches from the top edge. So that's the line drawn. And now turn your fabric back over, and we want to start folding. And the way to fold this is bringing the bottom of the fabric that's the right way up, bring the bottom up to the top until you get to your first line on the wrong side. That's the line that you marked at 2 1/2 inches. And then fold it down. Make sure that your edges are in line and nice and even. And I've got a nice tool here that I use to mark creases. You can iron it if you want to, but I've used a heat dissolvable pen and I'm at risk of dissolving the other lines. So I'm using that first. Now you want to fold back over until you come to the first line you've drawn on the right side that you drew at 4 1/4 inches. And again, making sure that you're keeping the edges in line. Fold the fabric down and finger press or mark with a pen, whatever you, finger press or iron. Now you want to bring the bottom up again to the second line you've drawn on the wrong side and fold. And now back over to the second line you've drawn. And then finally the last fold up to meet the last line you've drawn on the wrong side. And then the final fold down for the last line on the top side. And now I get my iron and I want to press all the folds like so, and overleaf. Now what we need to do is top stitch the 3 folds on the right side. So I'll do that and come back. Okay, so I've top stitched along the top of the folds, and then I've just basted down the edges very closely to the edge, about an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, just to keep them nice and neat. Now at this stage, if you want to, you can trim up to make the pocket dead set square if it has gone a little bit skewy. So that's all I needed to do. And then you get your other piece of fabric, which should be a little bit too big. I may cut it big on purpose just so that I knew I had more than enough for when I finished. So you want to put this right side down, and then if you turn over, you'll see that that is left at the bottom. So just trim the bottom to match up with the top, the credit card slots. So now we've got a nice matching piece there, and we're going to stitch all the way around but leaving a good 2-inch gap at the bottom. So we'll stitch at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're going to turn it the right way out. So I will go and do that now. Okay, so we've stitched all the way around the edges and I've trimmed the corners ready for turning. So now we just need to turn it the right way out. Okay, so I've turned it, and using my little turning tool, gently poke the corners out to try and give the good sharp corner that you can. It's worth taking time over it. Okay, so it's nice and pushed out as much as I can, and then I'm going to use one of my cards to push down inside to make sure that the pockets are sitting properly where they should. Give it a little press. And then you just want to make sure that the bottom seam edges are folded in nice and neatly, so that you'll give a nice neat closure. Now the last piece of top stitching you need to do is along this top piece. So you top stitch along there, and then I'm going to use excuse me, some double-sided tape. Just going to snip that little stitch that's poking out. I'm going to use some double-sided tape just to keep the bottom closed until we need to use it on our bag, which for the video will be next. But I've made this tutorial separately to use on other bags and to have on the internet as a standalone tip. So put your double-sided tape in there. And then close it. So there's a nice closed seam now. We'll top stitch along the top, and voila, that's our credit card slot ready to go. And all we'll do, I did get 3 out, so that, oh, there it is. I'm not using credit card, obviously. I'm using shop store cards, loyalty cards. I wouldn't show these things online. So there you go. When we sew it to the bag, we'll have an extra little pocket at the back there, because we'll stitch around the edges. So that's your credit card slot with your little pocket that will be created. Hello, I want to show you a brilliant way of making a bag strap. It's a unique and innovative way of doing it, and it's created by Lockwood and Webb Designs, and that's Natel Webb and Gwen Lockwood. They have patterns, bag patterns for sale, brilliant bag patterns I might add, and this is just the best way I've ever seen a bag strap be made, and they very kindly have given permission for me to show you the technique. But if you get a chance, I'm going to be giving the links to their website and Facebook group. So if you get a chance, join their group and have a look at the website and maybe purchase a pattern or two, because they're very good, and they're only sort of just quite new, so they don't have tons of patterns, but watch this space because they're going to have some beauties coming up. So that's that. What we do is we have half vinyl and half fabric. I mean, you can have complete vinyl, you can have vinyl and cork, you can have a mixture. It's nice to have a mixture rather than one particular type. It doesn't really work with just one cotton unless you use something like Peltex inside to give it a firmness. But to have the mixture of the softer woven fabric and vinyl or cork or leather is really good, and it's just a lovely way to do a bag strap. So what we need to do is we need to cut fabric that's 2 inches wide. The strap is going to end up being 1 inch wide. If you need a wider strap, if you need a 1.5 inch strap, then you double it to do 3 inches wide and whatever. But basically, whatever width strap you need to double it to start with. So it's as easy as that to work it out. The length's entirely up to you. This is for a crossbody strap, a crossbody bag strap, should I say, or a shoulder bag that you want an extendable strap for. If you're a tiny petite lady, then you probably just want quite a short strap. You don't, maybe 40 inches long, if that. For the larger ladies like myself, I like to have a slightly longer strap. Lockwood and Webb do generally suggest a 55 inch length to start with of each fabric. And that's generally what I follow. And as we know, most fabrics we use, unless we go down the fabric, if we're cutting across, the fabrics are generally 44 inches wide. So we do have to cut more than one strip. So then we have to join them. And this is how we do it. So we get, for instance, the piece of cotton, and we put right sides together and we put it this way down. I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit so it's easy for you to see. So we put them like that, and then just clip or pin them, whichever you prefer. To keep them in place. And then what you want to do is you want to draw a diagonal line going from one corner to the other. So just look for where the back of the, the corner of the back piece is, and just mark a little line so that you know where you've got to send the ruler to. And then going from this top corner here down to the line you marked, draw diagonally across, and we're going to stitch from there to there, back stitch at each end, and I shall come back and show you what we're doing after that. Okay, I have stitched both fabrics together, and then what you do is once you've stitched them like that, you open them up and you fold the pieces back on each other, and then top stitch across. And then once you've done that, trim the excess. And I did the same with the fabric, the cotton, and we trim that as well. So we cut both pieces, and that's the straps ready made. So I'm just going to check the length that we have, and that's the 20-inch, and that makes 50. We've actually cut to 61 inches, so we don't need all that, so I will trim that up. And seeing what cotton we need, because I may need to do a third piece onto this one. 20, 50, 54. So I'm not going to do a third piece. 54 inches is fine, so I'll trim this to 54 inches. And I shall do that now, because then I can show you the next part of the strap. That's 25, 50 and 4. And I want to make sure I do a straight cut. There we have it. And now the next part that we do, which I've already done, I've drawn a line down the centre of this one, of the vinyl, and then we get our trusty double-sided tape, and I go either side of the line that I've drawn. And do it a few millimetres away from the line. So just go along. I mean, you don't have to use double-sided tape. You can stick this down with glue. The only trouble is you end up having to wait for the glue to dry, so it's not as quick. If I do have to use glue, because I do have some vinyl that doesn't stick, the double-sided tape does not stick to. Actually, I need to leave about 3 inches from the end of the tape, and I should have done the same at that end, and you'll see why in a bit. So I shall trim that off. So yeah, leave about 3 inches either end. But yeah, so you may need to use glue, in which case what I do, I always start to prepare the strap before I do anything else with the bag, so that then whilst I'm waiting for it to dry, I can get on with the bag. I mean, some patterns do tell you to start with the strap anyway, but if they don't, it's worth advancing to that and getting the strap made. Plus, I think it's really nice when you finally finish your bag that the strap's already done. If you then have to make the strap, it's quite frustrating, because you just want to put the strap on and see what it's like. So it is nice to have the strap done. So we've put the double-sided tape, and it's not the straightest, but it doesn't have to be. And then take a piece of the backing off, and I tend to sort of go so far, and then I get into a sticky hot mess if I take it all off. So I'll take so much off and fold it to the middle and press. And I'm going to keep doing that, and I shall come back when I've done both sides to show you what's next. So the strap, the vinyl strap is all done, and we put that aside. And then the fabric one, I do slightly differently. You can draw a line along, sorry, I'm yawning. Oh, I beg your pardon. Not much sleep as usual. You can draw a line along the centre, but I just pressed it with the iron to form a crease. And then instead of putting the tape along the middle, I put it along the edge. That's because if it folds over on itself whilst we're doing it, it gets stuck. So doing it along the edge, it stops it happening. I've already done the one edge, and again I've left 3 inches at either end. Sorry, I haven't got that in the shot, have you? I do apologise. I forgot I zoomed in. Oh, goodness me. Oh, I really need a cameraman. I wonder if my husband's busy. I'm sure he'd love that, wouldn't he? Filming me all day. So yes, I've started peeling the tape off. I go so far, and then I fold into the centre. You really have to try and make sure it's straight, so that you don't end up with curved edges, because that would leave a bit of an untidy edge to your strap. And you keep going. Let's turn my iron on, because I will press this strap in a minute. Okay, that's that. Give the strap a quick press to flatten it out. I really want to make sure that the edges are nice and crisp. Okay, so that's that done. Now, this is the magic bit. This is where we start putting the strap together. And as we did before with the joins, we get the two different pieces of material and we put them across each other like this, just as we did before. Doesn't matter which way up. You know, this could be the vinyl, that could be the fabric, the cotton, shall I say, the woven. Okay. Mark the notch where the diagonal needs to go to. So I've drawn the line. I'm going to stitch across, open it up and top stitch and show you. Okay, so these are the pieces joined, and I forgot to say, but that's why you need to leave about 3 inches towards the end free from tape, not folded over. So we end up with that, and then we just need to put some more tape, and I will just put it along the centre for ease because it's only a short piece. You will find that this tutorial will be added along to any of the sew alongs that calls for this type of strap. It's going to save me time not having to film making the strap. It'll be a lot easier for me, and I'll only do different straps when the pattern calls for a different type of strap. So you'll see this fabric, even though I might be doing different fabric on another bag, but I'll probably explain that each time anyway, that you'll understand why. And this is actually, I've made this for the Taylor Unisex messenger bag by Huff and Cuffs. That's the sew along, that's the 4th sew along pattern we did, or we have done. So yeah, so we stick these down, so there we have one nice long continuous strap that's 110 inches long. So it's just come undone a bit there. We need to get the slider. Okay, so we just insert the slider onto the strap. Like so, and go up to the centre where the cotton matches or meets the vinyl. Now what I want to do before I go any further is to make sure it's going to match up nicely. Yep. It doesn't matter too much because you're going to join the other ends together. like so. So I've put the strap on, sorry, the slider on, and then just run your strap down so that you know it's not twisted, and keep going. And I'm just going to clip there just to save me having to keep doing it. I'm getting all caught up with the tape backing. Right, and now we want to join these ends together. And I want to make sure that I'm doing it right, so that when I've done it, so the way you do it, you've got the pieces like that and turn them that way. That way you won't have a twist at the end. If you did it, for example, like that, you're going to have a twist. So if you're looking at it, turn them both like that and then over. And that way you're sure to have the correct way. And again, this is why you leave the 3" at both ends. So I just want to mark where the diagonal needs to end there. If you haven't seen this technique, you're probably thinking at this point that I've lost my marbles. Because this is really such a different way to doing it that I've never seen anywhere else. And if you do see it anywhere else, then they've learnt it from Lockwood and Webb. I'm pretty sure of that. So draw the line. And I shall go and stitch it and return. So I've done that, and before you top stitch it and cut, you just need to check that it's going to be the right way, which that is. I have done it before. I have found that I've twisted it. So just double check before you top stitch and cut. So I'm going to go and top stitch and cut and return. So I've trimmed the edges. I've put my double-sided tape in there, because I know you didn't want to watch me doing that again. And we fold the edges in. And the next job we do is to trim any loose bits and pieces and fold this together, and we're going to stitch both pieces like strips together all the way down to the very bottom, across and all the way back up and across at the top. So we're stitching that in place. I shall return when we've done that. Okay, so I've stitched down the strap and stitched across near to the top, and now I'm going to put some rivets in, and I just need to find my rivet punch. So I do try to have them in nice and evenly, and you've got, I mean, sometimes I go down, sometimes two across. Up on a 1" strap, I like to go down, because going across, they're too close together. What am I doing? Oh goodness, because I'm talking. So I mark for the first rivet, and then, oops, It's got a life of its own, like a snake. And then 1/2 inch down from that, okay, this one is really mainly for decoration, because we're going to have rivets elsewhere, and it does secure it more. Okay, get my rivet press, my green machine, and press them down. I'm not sure that I went fully down. Oh, it did, yeah. So there we have the rivets. And now what we need to do, you need to decide which side you want showing to put the clasps on. Now, I hate vinyl straps being on my shoulder. When they're on clothes, they slip off. So I have the vinyl on the upper side and the cotton underside, because that tends to stick to fabric and doesn't slip off. Plus, when you're holding your bag, you can still see the nice fabric on the strap, so it doesn't really matter. So I want the clasp to sit up above the vinyl, like so. And now we bring the strap up and through the slider. So the clasp that we've put on is now stuck on the strap. It can't come off. I'm trying to put it short to show you. Like so. So we've got the slider and the clasp. And now with this end, we get the other slider, again making sure it's the right way up. Put the clasp on. Now you can turn over, and we need to fold the fabric over. Now you can do a stitch there if you like to. If you want to do a little stitch down, then by all means you can, or just add rivets. That's entirely up to you. I am going to stitch across there just to anchor it down, and then I shall be back. So there, I've stitched it across, and again, as before, I'm going to add a couple of rivets. So I've marked where I want them to go. And those of you that haven't seen me using this before, this is called a rivet punch, a screw punch, sorry, and it's brilliant. It's much better than using the hammer, and you know when you've gone all the way through because it sticks to your poly board. I can't I can't use the hammer. I misfire all the time, and I can't get through cotton fabric. I'm just not strong enough. And so buying this screw punch has been the best purchase of all. Just goes through, as you saw, nice and easily. And I don't have any trouble now. I used to use this punch, which sometimes I still use, but I often found that by the time I'd gone through, it had gone offline and it wasn't central, so the rivets never looked right. But now having the screw punch, it goes straight down and is where it's meant to be. Oh, there you go. So that's our strap made. Now, how good does that look? There's no, apart from this bend here, there's no raw edges. I mean, it's just lovely. I love it. So thank you, Lockwood and Webb, for this. Just absolutely brilliant. Right, now we start on the bag itself. You've just watched how to make the strap and also how to make your credit card pocket if you want to make it. This is my strap ready made with my hardware attached, and I've also pre-made the connectors. And the way you make the connectors is just the same way as you make the strap, but you start off with, I actually started off with 4-inch long and 2-inch wide pieces of vinyl and the cotton, and I joined them, met them in the middle as we did, folded them into the middle, stitched them together, and then I just put them inside the rings, folded them over, and then just added a rivet. And I made sure I added the rivet high enough from where this is going to be stitched to the bag so it doesn't get caught up. So that's how you make the connectors, pretty similar to your bags. I didn't think I needed to show you because well, it's because it's the same way as making the strap, you're just making it smaller. I've also got my zip ready, and I've prepared my handmade label. I may attach a vinyl piece on the outside so you stitch around the box, or I may just put the handmade bit on. It depends on how it looks. I always decide when I've made the bag. And I was just making my slip pocket, and what I like to do, you see, I've folded the pocket down. I started with 8.5 inch wide, 10.5 inches long, folded it in half lengthways, and stitched down each side and towards the middle, leaving a 2 to 3 inch gap. I've trimmed the seams and cut the corners so that we're reducing the bulk, and I'll just turn it the right way out. And what I like to do, you see, is I like to prepare everything in advance. There's nothing worse when you've made your bag and it's like, yes, I've finished it, and it's like, no, I haven't, I've got to make the strap. So I think get the strap done out of the way, which is why I put it on to the start of the video. And then if you've got everything else ready, like your credit card pocket, your slip pocket, and anything else that you're adding, then you can get on and make your bag and it will go swimmingly. Because if you're halfway through making the bag and it's like, oh no, time to make the credit card wallet now, so you have to stop making the bag and then make the credit card wallet, then go back to making the bag. And I don't know about you, but it's sort of, I find it a bit frustrating. I get a bit fed up with it. So I'm just poking the corners out like so. Make sure the corners are quite nice and pointy. And I've folded the seam in, and I'm just going to press the pocket like so. And all I need to do to this now is to top stitch along the folded side. So you've got the open side there, top stitch along there, and if you want to, you can use some double-sided tape to keep that seam closed, which I do like to do. Just pop that in there, remove the backing, if you can. I tell you, I have visions of you all screaming at the screen saying, oh, do this or do that, you're doing it wrong. Because there's got to be a trick to it that I haven't discovered. So there we go. So that's closed nicely. I'm going to top stitch there. I also want to double check that when you've made your credit card pocket, that you've top stitched along the top there. So do make sure you've done that bit as well. So I shall top stitch and return. So there's my top stitch pocket ready. So that's put aside. It's lovely knowing all that's done. And now just to go over the bits and pieces that we're using. We've got our zipper tabs here. I have interfaced everything ready. So we'll be using them in a bit. And then I've got my zipper pocket piece cut out and ready. And then we have, this is number 5 pattern piece, which is the back pocket piece. And we need one exterior and one lining. And again, like I said, I have interfaced everything that we're using. We've got the main panel top front. We need one interfacing. Now it does say to use one fleece. I'm not using fleece. On my first bag that I made, which is this one, I used fleece, and then I had to go around adding foam to it because the fleece, it was just floppy. So it's no good using fleece, I'm afraid. If you want to use it for the flap, you can, if you haven't got anything else to give it a bit of sort of strength. But please don't use it on the bag pieces because it's no good to use it. You're going to have to use foam. I mean, if you really want to, you can, but you'll have no substance to your bag. It will just, it will be like one of those thin cotton tote bags. And you really want to make a good bag. So that's the main top panel front. And then you've got the same with the main panel bottom front. You only have the one exterior. Then we've got the flap, and you cut one exterior and one lining. Well, I've done 2 exterior because I like it that when you open up the flap, you've got the attractive exterior fabric as well. So I've done that, but I've also lined it with some Decoville Light, which I used on my other flap. It is nice and thin, so you're not adding padding, but you're adding a little bit of strength to it. And I do love Decoville Light. So there are other products you can use. You can use Peltex if you want, but it does give it a bit of paddedness as well. So it's entirely up to you what you use. But you do need to use something, whether it's fleece. I think foam's a bit too thick. But yeah, fleece or whatever you want to use, it's entirely up to you. And now we've got our 2 pieces here. We've got the gusset piece. Now I've got the lining piece with the interfacing, and then I've got the exterior, which I'm using vinyl for, and I've got foam. Now this is fusible foam. It's fusible both sides, but I don't fuse the foam to the fabric, because if you do that, when you turn your bag the right side out, the cotton, your material on the foam's fused to, creases up, wrinkles up. Then you get the iron to it, with or without steam. It happens with both, and it wrinkles even more. And you've lost it. I mean, it's just, the quality's gone. The nice smooth fabric has gone. So don't fuse your foam. Please don't. I cut it big enough and I stitch it in, well, I basted it in with a long stitch a very long stitch, longest that I can do on the machine. And even if you have to hand tack it if your machine can't do it. The reason being is once you've stitched this in, you want to be able to snip your basting stitches and pull them out and then trim your foam out of the seam. This will reduce the bulk in the seam and give the bag a nice crisper look to it. So basting stitches, no fusing, and that's the way to go. I didn't worry about fusing before. If I was putting this onto cotton and that I would iron, what I would do to stop that happening, I use very cheap thin poly cotton that I buy on a bolt, really cheap, and I actually fuse that to the foam so that when I iron my bag or whatever, it's not going to fuse to it. It's fine. So that's how I get around that problem. And then the other bit that I've done the same with is the main panel. Now this is the main panel back, and again I've only done it down the side. You don't have to do it all the way around, but I've basted the foam to this, the back panel, and I haven't yet. I've got the two lining pieces, but this is for the front. When we've made the front, I'll attach it then. I'll also put a box in it, a hole to put the pocket into so that the pocket can be used freely. So they're all my pieces, and that's how I prepare. I like to get everything done ahead of time so that I can just get on and sew and not have to keep stopping to cut this and that out. So we shall get on with the stitching now. I'll sort myself out and I will return to say what's first to be done. Right, so the first thing we're going to do is to prepare the flap. So we've got both our flap pieces and we need to add the magnet. I'm going to add the magnet on the side that has the Decoville light because it just gives a bit more strength for the magnetic snap, so that when you're pulling it on and off and opening your bag, it's less stress on the fabric. So what we need to do is to get the center marking of the fabric. So we fold it in half and mark the crease point, which I've done, and then I'm just going to put a line so I can see where that is. And we want to measure 1.25 inches up from the curved edge. Which is there. So that's where I've marked. And it does say to fuse with a piece of stabiliser. I'm not going to do that. I add the fusible fleece afterwards because I've got the Decoville light there. If I didn't have the Decoville light, then yes, I'd put some on. So if you're using just fabric, do put a piece of stabiliser on, such as Peltex or fusible fleece, something that gives it a bit of strength. So what I need to do now is get the washer and put that centrally over that little cross marking that I did, and draw the lines that we're going to cut into. And I'm just going to get my craft knife, which I can't remember where I've put it, which is nothing new for me. There it is. And I'm going to put my holes into the fabric. You can use a seam ripper as well if you want to, if you don't have a craft knife. And then we're going to use the male part of the snap, and that's the one with the circle that's protruding out. This is the female piece with the dip in, and that's the male piece. And oh, I haven't done something that I always do, and that is to add a bit of fray check or fray block onto the holes, just to stop the fabric fraying. I only need to use a tiny bit, and it will dry of its own accord. And then pop the prongs through the fabric. Oops. Like so. And then put the washer on. And I fold in, some people fold out. So there's the male magnetic snap added. This is the lining piece, by the way. I should say that, because obviously if you haven't used the same fabrics, you're actually attaching this to your lining piece. So now I want to add a bit of fusible fleece. I just get a piece of fleece that I have left over from the project. I never throw away my little off-cut pieces because they come in handy. And we just want to fuse that in place. Go all the way around, making sure that all the sides are fused. There we go. And then we now need to put the right sides together on the flap and stitch all the way around, leaving the top open. Don't stitch to the top straight line. Now, if you're not brilliant at doing straight lines, especially around curves, what you could do is, using your ruler with a 1/4 inch seam, draw a line down, and then when you get to here, just nudge round. In fact, I'll show you, because it wouldn't hurt to have them on. The thing is, I'm drawing with a dark pen, so I'll go over and over and over. Right, so you get to this curve, and obviously you can't draw around the curve unless you've got a curved ruler. But you just put the ruler on an angle and mark a little line, just a tiny line, like that. And then put it on another bit of an angle of the curve, and again mark, and so on, and keep going round, so that you end up with marks like that. And then you can just do like dot to dot and join them together. So then you have your curved corner, and that curved corner, that's a bit of a wrong thing to say, but you've got your curve that's marked, and you carry on and do the same with the other corner. And then when you've got it on the machine, you can actually follow your stitch line that you've drawn. And that's a nice easy way to do it if you're not very good with following your lines. So I shall take that to the machine, stitch it, and then come back. Okay, so I've stitched all the way around, and now we need to turn it the right way out. It will sound a bit crisp if you've got the Decaville light in there, but it's fine. And then push all the corners out really well. Or all the seams out, should I say, not the corners. Push the seams out very well. And then just press with your iron to make sure you've got lovely crisp edges. And now we need to top stitch, and although you normally would want to top stitch on the top, on the bit that you see all the time, if you do that, you've got a chance that your magnetic snap is going to stick. Oh no, it's not this part, I beg your pardon, it's this one, the female part. You're alright with the male part, so stitch where you like. Just stitch all the way around, leaving the top open. In fact, stitch all the way around, and then you want to base stitch along the top, like a very long stitch, just to keep it closed. So there you go, stitch on 1/8 and an inch seam allowance all the way around, and then do a basting stitch along the top. Okay, so that's the flap made and top stitched all the way around, and then just basted closed at the top there. So we put that aside, and the next thing we need is our zip and our tab pieces. And what we need to do with the tab pieces that measure 1.5 inches by 3 inches is fold them in half, wrong sides together, and do that with both pieces. And then I just like to get my double-sided sticky tape and just use a small piece that's going to go, I've got the magnetic snap attaching itself, that just goes over the zip part, not the whole way across the tab. So just in the middle of the zip. And then decide which side of the zipper tab you want on show, and I like that side because it's got more gold. And I'm just going to line it above the tape, so that's that part stuck down. And then you've got to make sure you've got 8 inches of actual zip tape. So again, I'm going to stick this to the zipper tab this time, because I want it to be exact. I hope you can see what I'm doing from where you are. I think if I do use the ruler instead, so that you can see. So I've got to move the tab, the zipper pulled, should I say, and that's the 8-inch mark. So that's that, and we just need to top stitch across each piece. So we've top stitched both ends, and now we get the main panel bottom front, which is number 4. And we need to lay this with the zipper face down. I'm just going to move the zipper pull into the middle, and we need to lay this face down, but 1/4 inch away from the edge, so that the zipper tabs really are lining up with the edge. So that's what we need to do. I'm going to get some more tape just to hold it still. Just temporarily. So I'm only using a tiny bit. And then making sure you've got the zipper pull that starts from this side, so you've got it the right way up. Lay it face down centrally. I'm doing it by eye, but you may want to measure up. And then what we need to do is stitch straight across, all the way across, and obviously you'll move the zip pull out of the way. So I shall stitch that. So there we have the zip attached, and we just need to give it a little press open, and then we do the same with the top piece, the panel piece. And I just want to check that my fabric's going in the same direction as each other. Yeah, and then I need to flip it like that. So you do need to make sure that you are correct with your directional fabric and that it's matching. And line the sides up here. You need to line it up properly here, but you do need to make sure that the sides are matching with each other. Yeah, I'm happy with that. And I'm just going to put a little bit of double-sided tape along the zipper tab on that side to stop it from moving, because when I was doing this side it kept trying to move, so I should have done that in the first place, because I had to keep stopping and shifting it, because we all know that zips like to misbehave. So put a bit of double-sided tape along there. It should behave quite nicely. Right, so I'm happy with that. Okay, and then take it to the machine and stitch across that one. Oops, looking. Okay, so I've pressed both, I've sewn both sides and I've ironed it. So I've pressed down, and I made sure I was happy that the zip was looking straight, that it wasn't wobbly or anything like that. So once you're happy, you can top stitch both sides. Okay, well, I don't know about when you come to do it. I top stitched very closely, but there's not much seam left to add the pocket, so I'll have to add that very carefully and stitch very carefully. So I'll put a bit of double-sided tape along the edge here. Like so. Pull the backing off, and I want to make sure add the pocket piece to the edge of the I'm not sure what you call it, the seam, zipper seam I suppose. And then very carefully, and it will be very carefully, top stitch, not top stitch, stitch along there. Okay, so I've stitched, thankfully it did stitch okay. It just seemed such a narrow seam, but I managed to do it easily. So it's obviously an optical illusion that I look like, goodness, it's not going to have enough seam to stitch to, but it was actually plenty. And I should have known that because of the last bag I did. But sometimes I doubt what I'm doing. You know, it's like, is that right? I'm sure we all do that. Anyway, fold the pocket over and then attach it to the opposite zip seam. And then do the same again by stitching down there. Okay, so I've stitched both sides on, and if you hold your materials like that, that's how it should look. And all I'm going to do now is making sure that the pocket's laying towards the bottom, which is the curved end, is to stitch each side. You won't be able to stitch to this very top, but once you put the bag together, it'll be okay. This will be sort of attached, so you'll be fine. So that's the pocket side sewn, and you can see that I could only go up, there's about 1 inch left each side, but that really is okay to do. So with that sorted, we're going to do the darts next. So what I did when I prepared the panel was to cut out the darts so that they were easy to mark, and so I'm just going to mark with my white marker, heat dissolvable of course, erasable. So it just takes a few seconds to appear. So as you can see, I've marked the dart, and what you need to do is pinch at the top corner and then meet the 2 lines on either side, and then grab a pin. I wouldn't use a clip for this, I'd definitely use a pin to keep it in place. Like that. Do the same with the opposite side. Pinch at the top of the triangle and then meet the lines together, and just check that you've got them at the top, that the lines are together. And I should have marked this side, which was silly of me, because I'll have to undo. And you've got to mark the other side as well, which I knew. I've done enough darts in my time to know this, so I don't know what I was paying attention with there. So you're marking, I like to mark both sides. If you want to just mark this side, you can, but I follow these lines to meet up, and then the outer lines to stitch with. Yeah. And then again, pinching at the corners. Let the lines meet. Pin. And then you're going to sew down the dart. I start at that end and come up here, then I leave quite a long trail of thread. Don't backstitch, long trail of thread, and then when you take it out, tie it a few times and then snip the stitches. So that's how you tie the ends off. Don't backstitch. Okay, so I've stitched the darts, and then, like I said, leave a long enough thread that you can tie the ends off with. Because if you backstitch, there's a chance that it could pull and pucker. And you don't want that. You want a nice, tidy dart. So I just like to tie it 3 times just to make sure. And then you can just snip the threads. And oops, my hands are cold today, so I don't know about you, I find when my hands are cold it's hard to do anything or any fine work. So snip the threads again and then just quickly heat press so you don't have any dark markings on the reverse, on the outside of the fabric. So there's your darts made, and I do have some of the white showing through, naughty white, a little bit on there. So that's that. So that's your darts made. At this point, this is where I add the foam. And I just like to, I've made the foam smaller than the piece, which is correct at top and bottom, but the size it's the same. The reason being is it just saves cutting out the top and the bottom. So I want to line up where I want that to go, and I'm just going to mark the line for the pocket. And then with a ruler, look straight to me, so I've drawn the opening for the box and cut it open, and this is for the pocket to go through, and it is quite a big opening, but you just want to make sure that you've definitely made a big enough gap to put things into your pocket with. If you only do a small gap, when you're putting things into the pocket, it's like a letterbox. Think of it as a letterbox. And if you have a small gap, then it's going to be putting things in, you know, tiny gaps. So you just want to make sure of it. And then I'm happy with the fitting. And I'm just going to baste the sides with a long stitch. And I shall come back. And there I've basted each side. And that's so that we can trim later on. So that's our back piece prepared. Front piece, I beg your pardon. Now, if you want to add your handmade label or your own logo label, etc., at this point, this is when you do it. And I'm just looking at it without. Yeah, I'm not going to use the little bit of vinyl. I'm going to attach this as it is without the, and I just want to line up, and I like to put mine centrally and mark. A 5-inch mark, and then I get my washer and put it take that out of my mouth, put it over the dot I've just made, the central dot, and then mark the where I want the washer to go. And this goes through the second but last prongs, so I mark the space for that, rather than the last two places. So, oh, yeah, make sure your pocket's well out of the way, which I had. I'm going through the foam because the foam acts as a nice padding for the label. Oh, I'm putting the label on upside down. So make sure it fits in the holes. Yep, and I'm just going to get a little bit of my fray check to put at the holes. And then push it through. These are lovely long prongs on these labels. Fold it down, and I'm not going to put anything over this because the pocket's going to be there, which will be protecting everything anyway, the lining fabric, and it's not going to cause a problem. So there we have my label on there. Now we put this aside, and we need to get our back panel piece, which has the foam attached, and the back pocket piece, and we need to prepare our back pocket. Now if you want to add a bit of fleece on one side to give the pocket a little bit of light padding, then now's the time to do it, and I'm actually going to do that. So I need to cut a piece of fleece and I shall be back. Okay, so I've fused my fleece to the outer piece of fabric, and I've left a gap on each area to allow for the seams, because otherwise you'll have bulky seams. And we're just going to now mark the darts. And then turn over and mark. I like to mark both sides so that I find it easier to fold the darts following these lines on the outside. But then of course, as we saw earlier, you need the other side to sew as a guide for sewing. Okay, so just wait for the white to appear. It takes a few seconds. And then pinch and follow the lines. Hold with a pin. And I do leave the pin in whilst I sew. I just make sure I go over the pin carefully. Pinch at the corner, follow the lines. And then, as we did before, stitching from that end on a double stitch, then down and leave a long thread. Okay, so that's the dart done. And what I should have done and shown you on the other one, I forgot, is to trim the dart at 1/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And just grab this piece and do the same on this piece. I mean, it's not too late until you've sewn it together, so. So that's the front panel piece trimmed as well. And now we get our pocket pieces and we put them right sides together. And we're just going to stitch along the top at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So there's the stitching across the top at the 1/4 of an inch. And then we want to, I'm just going to press the seams open to get a nice top edge. And then I'm going to just press on the other side as well. And then fold the top edge over. Fold the top edge. And just making sure that you're just slightly rolling the fabric over so that you've got the outer fabric just peeking over the top of the lining, like so, rather than having the lining peeking over the top edge of the outer. And then just top stitch across the top. And something I forgot to do, which isn't thankfully too late, was add the magnetic snap. So we need to get, I completely forgot to do that, but it's fine, it's not too late. And if you were shouting at the screen to say you haven't done the snap, then you were right to do so. So I'm just looking for adding the snap. Right, the snap has to be added 1.25 inches down from the top. Now we've used 1/4 inch seam allowance. So if you followed me and not the directions, then you need to add 1 inch from the top, taking into account the seam allowance that we've sewn. And just mark the central point. And as before, put the washer over the dot, mark the lines, and then making sure you don't go through both sides of your fabric. I knew there was a reason I left this out, and then I put it away, not thinking oh, that was clumsy. But there you go. And then just cut through for the prongs. Use a bit of fray block. And then we're using the male magnetic snap with the circle protruding. And because I've got fleece on this side, I'm not going to add any fleece over the snap because that's fine as it is. So we've added the snap piece, and we need to get our back panel piece. And we need to mark 5 3/4 inches down from the top for the opposite snap for the female. So 5 3/4 inches down. And then I want to mark the central spot. Which is there. Now I'm just going to check by putting the pocket on, which we'll be doing in a moment, to make sure that the snap's lined up with where it needs to be. And yes, it is. So we're okay with the placement. And then get the washer, which I had a moment ago. Oh, I'll get another one out to save chasing them. And mark I want to go, and I'm just going to double check because I really want to make sure that we are right, or that I'm right. Yes. Just always worth checking 2 or 3 times if necessary. And cut in for where the prongs need to be. Add some more fray check. I'm just going to erase the markings now. And then that's it. I couldn't find where the markings are. Oh look, there's the there's the mosh washer. Pesky thing. Right, push the prongs in. And fold over. I need the scissors for that, hurt. So, let's check. Perfect. Lovely. And what we actually do now is just baste the pocket around an 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. But before we do that, let's do the darts. I'm having a nightmare. There you go. We know the pocket fits. Let's mark for the darts. Just lifting the, in fact, I'm going to trim the foam now. There. Mark the darts. And what I'm going to do is just cut the foam away from the dart area so that it's not bulking up the dart. So there we have it. And then as usual, pinch and fold. And then stitch the dart lines. I shall come back. Okay, so the darts have been sewn and I've trimmed as we're meant to. And now we need to attach the back pocket piece to the back panel. And the magnetic snap wants to do that anyway. And you'll see there that the magnetic snap fits fine and it's all right around the edges. And now we need to just base stitch around the outside edge on an 1/8 to 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I shall do that now. Okay, so I've base stitched around the edge and along the bottom. And now we get our main panel piece and we need to add the magnetic snap. Now the instructions say to mark it 3 3/4 inches down from the top, which I did with this bag. And yes, it fits nicely, but if you look, it's slightly pulling. And that's irritating the heck out of me. Had it been higher, just slightly higher, wouldn't be pulling. So I'm actually going to put my magnetic snap a little bit higher. It's not a massive problem, but I'd rather have it a little bit higher, because if it's a little bit higher, that's fine. It's having it too low that's not good. So if we're doing a 3 3/4 inch from the top edge, I'm going to mark it 3 1/2 inch from the top edge. So I'll put a line across, and then I want to get the centre part. Ruler the wrong way around, which is at 5. So where's my white pen? It's going to help me a lot more. So I've marked the lines, and we're going to go through the foam also. And the fray block. I'm just going to wipe out the lines now, because I don't need them any longer. And we get the... I'm hopeless, aren't I, at losing things? There you go. The female part of the snap. And if you've used them the other way round, male, female, it doesn't matter. As long as you've got them, you know, opposite snaps, that's absolutely fine. And then fold them in. And this is going to be against the lining fabric, so I'm going to get a rough piece of oh goodness, fusible fleece, and fuse that on. I have to be careful because this is fusible also, and so I don't want to press my iron flat and end up with it stuck and getting sticky on the iron. That's that. So that's nice and stuck. So that's our front and back stitched. Now it tells you to make the strap and the connectors, and if you followed my video, you've done that already, so isn't that a joy? And all we need to do next is, once you've made the connectors, is add them to the outer piece of the gusset. And we want to make sure that they go in the middle, and I cheat with that. Put my lids on for the ink to dry out. And put it on my cutting mat, and I can line it up there. It's almost 3 inches wide, and then I want to check that it doesn't matter which side my rivets are for when I stand them up, and that will go there nice and evenly. And if you want to use a different connector, you can. I was tempted to do that this time. I was going to use one of my fancy connectors and attach it, but I thought it was better to show you this way, which is the way they do it, you know, to add this type of connector. So I'm just putting a little bit of double-sided sticky tape so I can keep it in place for when I stitch it. And there we go. And do the same this end. A little bit of double-sided sticky tape on that side. And there we go. And I'm just going to stitch across both of these at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and I shall return. Okay, so I've added the connectors to the gusset, and now we need to construct the outer bag. So we get both pieces, and we need to mark, just trimming the threads, we need to mark halfway points. So my bag is 10 inches across, so yours should be as well. So I mark at the 5-inch mark, and I do, with the gusset, fold it in half, and get a darker pen, mark both sides. So you've got the other one done for in a minute, and then where you've put the mark there, get the gusset, and where it's marked, put it together. If you're making an all cotton bag, you can pin this part, but if like me you're using vinyl or another fabric similar, you need to use clips. You could possibly try double-sided sticky tape and try taping it, but I'm not sure how that would, whether that would be very reliable. So, clipping the gusset all the way round. And then we'll do the same up the other side. And we'll stitch this with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way round. And once you've stitched it, you can trim the foam out of the seams. Be careful not to cut the stitches as you do it. And you should find your gusset fits equally with the bag. So I'm going to go and stitch that at 3/4 of an inch seam allowance all the way round, and then I'll just come back and show it to you. Okay, so there we have it stitched all the way around. And what I do is, before I do anything else, I like to turn it the right way out and just check that everything looks okay, that it's all nicely stitched, that the corners as such are okay. And yes, I'm happy with that. And now we do exactly the same with the opposite piece, and mark the centre part, centre place, and where we've already marked up the gusset, join them together, and we clip all the way around again and stitch at 3/8 of the seam allowance. And again, I shall go and do that and show you the results. Okay, so I've stitched the gusset to both sides and turned it right side out, and there we have the exterior of the bag made. I've trimmed the seams to 1/4 of an inch seam allowance and removed the excess foam. And now what we want to do is attach the flap. So we lay the flap with the magnetic clasp right side up, and we want to lay the flap. I'm looking at this, we've got like 1/2 an inch either side of the back of the bag. I'll show you what I mean. We've got 1/2 an inch either side. like that there. So the flap is in the middle. And we just base stitch across 1/4 of a seam allowance. All you need to do at the moment. Okay, so I've attached the flap. I double checked I was happy with where the clasp was sitting. And so we put that aside. And I know I've done it differently to the layout of the tutorial, but you can follow the tutorial if you'd rather. But now we're doing the linings. And we're going to attach the credit card pocket if you've done one. If you'd rather do a zip pocket, by all means do, but because we've got a zip pocket on the outside, I just thought it'd be nice to add something different to the inside. Okay, so we've got a distance of 10 inches across, and this credit card slot pocket, whatever you want to call it, measures just over 4 inches. So where we're going to place it is just under 3 inches either side, and I'm just going to pin it in place while I stitch it, just at the top and the bottom. And I'm just going to check that I've still got that straight in line with the top. Yes, I'm happy with that. And at the same time, on the other slip piece, lining piece, we're going to attach the slip pocket, and we're going to put that 2.5 inches down from the top, and this is just under 8 inches wide, so it's just over 1 inch either side, and we attach that. And the reason why I'm putting it slightly lower than the credit card slot is because this is going to house like perhaps pens or something, you know, that tall, so the pockets need to be a little bit lower to allow for anything like pens, etc., to sit into the pocket. So yeah, so I'm happy with the layout of that. So I'm going to stitch both of them around the sides and the bottom, and pay particular attention at the tops, just to double stitch over or triple stitch over to anchor them down. So I'm going to stitch them and return. So I've stitched the credit card pocket on, and just to check that the slots are wide enough for a card, there you go. And of course you've got the pocket at the back for mobile phone, etc. If you wanted to put this a bit lower for your phone, if you've got a large mobile phone, you can sit this lower. It's entirely up to you where you place this. And then my slip pockets, and what I did was I marked a centre line down the middle and stitched down the middle. So we've got 2 pockets, and I've just added my name label. So again, as before, as we did with the outer pieces, we're going to mark for the centre of the lining panel, like so, and mark both pieces up, and then get the lining piece, and we need to mark the lining also. Sorry, not the lining, the gusset. Goodness me. So just marking the gusset, both sides. And then attach the pieces as before. And now, as I'm using cotton, I'm going to actually pin them for a change. So we'll pin all the way around, and then instead of stitching at 3/8 of the inch seam allowance, we'll start off at 3/8 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch, stitch 1 inch down, and then move out to 1/2 inch, all the way around, and then when we get to an inch away from the top, we move back into 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. This ensures that the lining sits nicely inside. And then when we add the other side, we stitch an inch down, 3/8 of an inch, move out to 1/2 inch and stop, double stitch, and then come to the bottom and carry on. You want to leave a good 5 or 6 inch gap down the side and then stitch all the way around. So both linings start at 3/8 of an inch at the top and move to 1/2 inch all the way around. So I shall line this, attach this, stitch it. I shall come back to you when it's done. Okay, so I've attached the pockets. There's a nice pocket at the back here, the credit card slot. If you wanted to put your mobile phone into it, and you've got quite a large mobile phone, you could sit this a little bit lower. Just judge it for yourself, remembering to leave 1/2 inch, at 1/2 inch at the top, at the seam, for the seam. So you need to gauge that. And the same with the slip pockets. If you want them a little lower, you can. And what I've done was I've measured halfway across and did a line down the centre and stitched down the centre, so that we've got 2 pockets, and I've added my name label. The remaining thing to do for the lining pieces are to do the dreaded darts. I say dreaded darts because they just take up time, and I want to get my bag made. So mark the darts as before. Both sides. And I've also marked the halfway line for the gusset. So I've already marked halfway across, which for me was 5 inches into the centre. I've done that as well, marked on this side, and fold the gusset in half, and we mark that as well. So I've marked my V's, or my darts should I say, if I'm talking professionally. So I've marked the darts. With the gusset, I folded in half, and then I just marked both sides ready. So I shall quickly stitch these darts and come back. Okay, so I've done the darts and I've trimmed the excess. And then what we need to do is, as we did with the outer, attach the gusset to the lining piece and stitch it all the way around. And what we do is we start at the top, obviously with that way around, we start at the top with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and when we get to about an inch, move out to 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. And then when we get to an inch from the top again, we move back to 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. This is to ensure that the lining sits nicely inside the bag and it's not too baggy. And we do the same with this side as well, only we stitch a few inches down, again starting at 3/8 of an inch, moving out to 1/2 inch, stitch an inch or so down, then leave a good gap of 6 or 7 inches, carry on down here all the way round, and then again at 1/2 inch until we get to an inch from the top, move back to 3/8 of an inch. So don't forget to leave the gap for turning. So I'm going to do that and return. Okay, so I've stitched everywhere apart from that gap there for turning, and the bag is ready now to put together. You can trim the seam allowances also, but if you do trim the seam allowances, be careful about, obviously don't trim this seam allowance. So I'm trimming to 1/4 of an inch. And then stopping there, and then just a little bit up there. So that's how I would trim that side. and then do the same on the other side, but obviously you can go all the way around. Also, I thought about it whilst I was stitching, that if you're uncomfortable about sewing gussets onto bags and going around the corners as such, the curves, you could put double-sided tape along the edge of the gusset and then stick it to the lining instead of using pins, and that way it would give you better control and so on. So that's always worth trying. Just an idea. Okay, so we want to pop it in and make sure whichever side of the lining you want on the back that you're putting it in correctly. So I want this part of the bag to be at the back, so that's why I'm popping this in here. And make sure that the flap is sitting down inside the bag. And it will be a snug fit, obviously, because you have made the lining smaller. So you just have to squash it down a bit and push it down. And then match the seams up on the gussets, the exterior and the interior. I've dropped my thing in there. And open the seams up on the inside, so that the seams are open, so there'll be no bulky parts. And match up both seams. Having a struggle with mine. It doesn't want to sit on the seam. It wants to sit aside. Oh goodness, and the seams don't want to open either. Right. If your boss tries telling you that if your bag tries telling you that it's the boss, you just need to show it that you are. As this one's trying to do to me. Okay, so we've lined them up, and then hopefully your side panels will fit nicely together and there'll be no baggy parts. So they should fit together nicely like this. And again on the other side. And then we're going to stitch all the way around at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And make sure that it's stitched nicely all the way around. And then I will come back and show you. Okay, so I've stitched all the way around the top. You can trim to 1/4 of an inch seam allowance if you want to. Personally, I find it easier to top stitch with a bit of a larger seam inside. So I'm not going to trim the seam allowance, but I am going to trim out the foam. You really need to do that because the seam is very, very, very bulky. So if you trim out the foam like this, it'll be a lot easier for stitching. Okay, so now we turn her, or birth her. So put your hands inside, squish her down and pull her through. and I've left a nice wide gap so that it's easy to do. Sometimes if it's too small, I have to get my husband to do it because my hands just won't do it. I'm sorry if I'm going out of shot, but sometimes I have to pull it close to do it. Right, oh, there we go. And what I'm going to do is give the lining a little bit of a press and press the seam allowance down, and then stitch her closed. So I just give her a little tidy up from where we've turned her. And it's not too bad, to be honest with you. Check your flap to make sure that it has all been caught within the seam, that you haven't got any I'm just trimming out some loose threads here. So you just want to make sure that everything's neat and tidy and the flap's fully sewn in before you go closing her. And as I said, stitch the seam allowance, and it is quite a large seam allowance. It's 1/2 inch. Like so. And I just, as usual, like to use some double-sided tape when I know where it is. It's over here. To hold her closed while we stitch her closed. So and then the thing with double-sided tape is it allows you to close them neatly and evenly to make sure that you don't have any overhanging seams. So it really is my best friend. Okay, so I'm just going to stitch that closed and then knit back. Okay, so I've stitched the seam very close together, and now we want to push the lining inside the bag. And make sure all the curves go into each other. So you should have a fairly tidy lining that sits inside the bag, and you're going to be top stitching around the edges. Crucial to top stitch. I have seen people make bags and they don't top stitch, and you can tell, and it looks like that and it's not a good finish. It really isn't. So if there's one thing you do to your bags is top stitch. Just trimming out any little loose frayed bits. So you want to roll the hem so that it's slightly over the edge that way rather than that way, and obviously have the connectors sitting up, and when you stitch round the flap you've got to stitch round like that, because if you stitch round like that you're going to stitch the flap down. So please make sure when you're top stitching you go around that way. So I'm going to go and top stitch and return and show you the results. Okay, so I've top stitched all the way around, and the bag is complete. And as you can see, because I've put the magnetic clasp higher, I haven't got that pull. And the bag's not completed until the strap is on. And there. She's a gorgeous bag, isn't she? Lovely design. So I can't wait to see all of your bags. Please share them in the group. It's really important. I don't ask for any payment for the sew-alongs. My payment is seeing your beautiful bags, and it is one of the conditions of being in the group is that you do post the bags that you make. So please do share. I look forward to seeing them. Happy stitching. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Bye.